Eleanor Whitman, Peter Lowell, and Margaret Hayes all came seeking answers, but what they found at Mystic Haven wasn't guidance. It was death. Behind the tarot cards and flickering candles, Madame Seraphina and her network of mediums may have been orchestrating murders, leaving a trail of fear and unanswered questions that still haunts the town. In a quiet suburban town, life moved at a predictable pace, but an undercurrent of curiosity and superstition had begun to stir. Small shops advertising tarot readings, psychic consultations, and mystical remedies had appeared along the main street, drawing a mix of believers, skeptics, and the desperate. Among these establishments, Mystic Haven stood out. Its deep purple velvet curtains framed a window filled with flickering candles, crystal balls, and carefully arranged herbs. The shop seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, inviting passers-by to step inside and glimpse the secrets of their futures. Madame Seraphina, a medium with a reputation for extraordinary accuracy, ran the shop. Her presence was magnetic. People felt compelled to share their fears, hopes, and regrets under her watchful gaze. Eleanor Whitman, a wealthy socialite admired for her philanthropy, was among those drawn to Mystic Haven. Eleanor was a woman accustomed to control, her life meticulously organized, her circle of friends selective. Yet even she could not resist the allure of a glimpse into the unknown. Her visits became frequent, and soon Madame Seraphina held a prominent place in her life, guiding decisions that ranged from investments to personal relationships. The townspeople watched with fascination, some quietly disapproving, others openly curious. Whispers spread, connecting the medium to every major decision Eleanor made, as if her fortune readings were inseparable from Eleanor's newfound boldness and prosperity. On a stormy autumn night, Eleanor's life came to a sudden and shocking end. She was discovered alone in her expansive home, slumped in a chair, a look of serene acceptance on her face. At first glance, her death appeared natural, but subtle inconsistencies drew the attention of investigators. A fine, nearly invisible powder was found on her writing desk, and her recently updated will left a large portion of her wealth to Madame Seraphina. Most striking of all was a small card found on the floor beside her, a simple rectangle of thick paper, inscribed with symbols that none of the local authorities could decipher. The town was thrown into a whirlwind of speculation. Some believed Madame Seraphina had somehow foreseen Eleanor's death and capitalized on it, a mystical benefactor who claimed rewards from her visions. Others suspected darker motives. Had the medium manipulated Eleanor's choices for personal gain? Was her influence entirely benevolent, or had it been a carefully orchestrated form of control? Police interviews revealed no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints beyond Eleanor's own. The house appeared undisturbed, as though death had entered quietly, leaving only questions in its wake. As investigators struggled to make sense of the scene, the community reacted in two distinct ways. Some began to fear the power that Madame Seraphina seemed to wield, whispering that the unseen hand of witchcraft had touched their town. Others were captivated, drawn to the idea that supernatural forces were at work, and continued to visit Mystic Haven, hoping to glimpse their own futures. Among the townspeople, a subtle tension began to grow, a sense that the ordinary world was being eclipsed by something unknown, and that those who claimed to see the future might be shaping it in ways far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Even as questions lingered, Madame Seraphina maintained her composure, continuing to welcome clients with calm assurance. No one could prove her involvement, yet a shadow of suspicion hovered over every interaction, every consultation, and every whispered prediction. The town had crossed into a space where belief and fear intertwined, and the first threads of a far-reaching, unsettling story were beginning to take hold. Weeks passed after Eleanor Whitman's mysterious death, and the town struggled to shake the unease that had settled over it. Life continued on the surface, but whispers of witchcraft and foul play echoed in quiet corners. The attention that had once been focused solely on Madame Seraphina now spread to other practitioners of the occult scattered across the town. Among them was a small, dimly lit apartment where Peter Lowell, a struggling young artist, lived surrounded by canvases, paints, and a growing collection of mystical paraphernalia. Peter had recently sought guidance from several mediums, drawn by promises of insight into his stalled career and tangled personal life. He had filled his apartment with tarot decks, journals covered in scribbled symbols, and candles burning with faintly scented wax meant to inspire creativity, or so he believed. One evening, Peter was found dead in his apartment under circumstances that puzzled even seasoned detectives. Candles were scattered across the floor, each extinguished as if by an unseen hand. His journals lay open, pages filled with frantic notes about visions, predictions, and warnings he claimed to receive from the spirits. At first, the death was ruled accidental, attributed to an overdose of hallucinogens he had been experimenting with for inspiration. However, forensic examination revealed traces of a rare herbal toxin, one that could induce hallucinations and slow the body's vital functions. Like Eleanor's death, there were cryptic symbols left behind, this time etched into the wooden frame of his easel. The investigation into Peter's death revealed unsettling connections. He had recently visited Mystic Haven and other occult shops, often speaking of instructions he received from Madame Seraphina and her colleagues. His journals mentioned ceremonies designed to cleanse obstacles and gain favor from unseen forces, language eerily similar to the phrases found in Eleanor Whitman's private notes. Detectives began to suspect a pattern. Both victims had sought advice from the same circle of mediums, and each had encountered circumstances that left their deaths shrouded in ambiguity. It was as if someone, or something, was orchestrating events behind the scenes, leaving only subtle hints of their presence. The townspeople reacted with a mixture of fear and fascination. Some claimed that the deaths were accidents caused by dabbling too deeply in powers humans were not meant to understand. Others speculated that the mediums were using occult knowledge to manipulate, control, or even eliminate those who trusted them. Madame Seraphina's reputation, previously untarnished, began to attract scrutiny. Clients whispered among themselves, unsure if their confidences were safe or if their faith had placed them in peril. As the investigation deepened, authorities realized that these incidents were not isolated. A network of psychics, fortune-tellers, and self-proclaimed witches appeared to operate with near impunity, their influence protected by secrecy and the town's fascination with the supernatural. Establishing motive proved difficult. The deaths were wrapped in layers of ritual, fear, and the allure of spiritual guidance. Yet the parallels could not be ignored. Symbols, journals, herbal toxins, and patterns of influence pointed toward something deliberate and chilling. The town was awakening to a terrifying possibility, that those who claimed to see the future were not merely reading it, they might be shaping it, in life and in death. Authorities faced a growing challenge. Every psychic seemed to have a loyal following ready to defend them, and each new lead only revealed more questions. Shadows of doubt and suspicion stretched across the community, leaving residents to wonder whether the deaths of Eleanor Whitman and Peter Lowell were random tragedies or the calculated results of a network capable of manipulating fate itself. Fear, curiosity, and suspicion interwove, setting the stage for even darker revelations that were yet to come. The uneasy quiet that had settled over the town was shattered months later with the death of Margaret Hayes, a local historian known for her meticulous research and keen interest in the town's past. Margaret had always been fascinated by the occult, but unlike the other townspeople, she approached it with a scholar's eye rather than a seeker's faith. She spent countless hours documenting the history of Mystic Haven and its neighboring shops, noting patterns, client lists, and even obscure rituals described in old diaries. Margaret had begun compiling evidence suggesting that the medium's influence extended far beyond simple fortune-telling or guidance. She believed they might be orchestrating deaths to eliminate obstacles, secure wealth, and maintain control over vulnerable clients. Margaret was found in her study, surrounded by piles of journals and torn pages that bore detailed accounts of interactions between local psychics and their clients. Her death was staged to resemble suicide. She sat at her desk, a faintly disturbing smile on her face, as if she had accepted a truth too heavy to bear. Investigators noted subtle but telling signs of foul play. Pages had been removed from her journals, leaving only fragments of her research behind. Candles burned in an irregular pattern around the room, and faint traces of rare herbs were found on the floor and in the air vents. Unlike previous victims, Margaret had actively been investigating the network, making her death feel less accidental and more like a warning. Her notes, though incomplete, revealed a chilling picture. She documented clients who had altered wills, businesses that had collapsed under mysterious circumstances, and individuals who had abruptly disappeared after consulting with the mediums. Some pages contained cryptic phrases that seemed to connect the deaths of Eleanor Whitman and Peter Lowell to the broader operations of Mystic Haven. Margaret theorized that the mediums used fear and superstition as tools, manipulating clients into taking actions that benefited the psychic's own ambitions. Her research suggested that what appeared as accidents or tragedies were, in fact, part of a deliberate and carefully concealed system of control. The discovery of Margaret's death sent shockwaves through the town. Residents who had previously dismissed the earlier incidents as coincidences began to reconsider their assumptions. The media labeled the emerging pattern the Witchcraft murders, framing the story as a dangerous blend of superstition, manipulation, and potential homicide. Public scrutiny intensified, and authorities were forced to acknowledge that the network of psychics could no longer be ignored. Yet even as the investigation gained momentum, the mediums remained elusive, their operations protected by secrecy and the loyalty of devoted clients. Authorities examined the few remaining pieces of evidence, attempting to connect the deaths through symbols, journals, and eyewitness accounts. Shadowy figures were reported near the homes of the deceased, and surveillance captured fleeting movements that could not be easily explained. The combination of ritualistic elements, strategic manipulation, and careful obfuscation painted a picture of a network capable of acting with both precision and patience. Every lead seemed to loop back to the same circle of psychics, yet direct proof remained frustratingly out of reach. The town was gripped by a growing sense of dread. Ordinary life continued, but an invisible tension hung over every street and alley. People began to question the intentions of anyone claiming mystical insight, fearing that trust could bring not guidance, but death. Margaret Hayes's fate served as a grim turning point, revealing the possible scope of the psychic's influence and the dangerous power of belief when wielded with cunning and cruelty. What had begun as curiosity and fascination had transformed into suspicion, fear, and an unsettling awareness that the future could be controlled and even stolen by those who professed to see it. The tension in the town reached a breaking point when a former employee of Mystic Haven came forward with information that cast the medium and her network in an even darker light. She claimed to have overheard conversations between Madame Seraphina and her colleagues that suggested far more than spiritual guidance. Phrases like removing obstacles and claiming rewards were used casually, as if the discussion of manipulating lives were ordinary business matters. The testimony hinted at a deliberate and methodical system in which the medium selected individuals for influence, persuasion, or even elimination, all while maintaining an appearance of benevolence. Authorities acted swiftly on the tip, coordinating raids on Mystic Haven and other occult shops across town. Inside, they discovered shelves lined with rare herbs, ritual objects, and journals filled with coded entries, symbols, and instructions. Candles, crystals, and talismans were arranged in precise patterns, suggesting that every element of the environment was carefully controlled for psychological impact. Despite the discoveries, the search yielded no murder weapons, and the psychics insisted that everything found was intended for spiritual practices. Their explanations were plausible enough to satisfy the law, leaving investigators frustrated and wary of the medium's skill at concealment. The investigation revealed how deeply intertwined the network of psychics had become with the town's social fabric. Many clients were loyal to the point of defending the practitioners publicly, insisting that the mediums offered comfort, insight, and protection. Those who questioned the psychic's motives were met with subtle intimidation or ostracism, creating an environment where fear and admiration existed side by side. Even authorities felt the pressure, as every attempt to gather evidence was met with vague but persistent resistance, from missing records to uncooperative witnesses. As the task force pieced together connections, it became apparent that the deaths of Eleanor Whitman, Peter Lowell, and Margaret Hayes were not isolated tragedies, but rather part of a pattern. The victims had all interacted with multiple psychics, leaving behind traces of cryptic symbols, ritual notes, and journals filled with observations about the medium's guidance. Each incident had been carefully orchestrated to appear accidental or self-inflicted, blurring the lines between coincidence and design. The investigators faced the daunting challenge of proving intent when the perpetrators had covered every move with layers of secrecy, charm, and misdirection. Outside the walls of law enforcement, the town itself seemed to grow restless. Reports of black-clad figures moving through empty streets, unexplained shadows near abandoned buildings, and whispers of strange gatherings in the dead of night fueled a growing paranoia. Residents were forced to navigate a world where the familiar could conceal hidden danger, and trust in ordinary human behavior was eroded by the pervasive influence of those who claimed mystical insight. Even as raids and investigations continued, Madame Seraphina and her associates maintained their public personas, projecting calm, wisdom, and authority. They seemed to anticipate every inquiry, every suspicion, and every attempt at intervention, leaving investigators questioning how much of their operation was reality and how much was the careful manipulation of perception. The lines between superstition, control, and criminal activity were increasingly blurred, creating an atmosphere where the law struggled to catch up to those who had mastered the art of influence. In the shadows of Mystic Haven and its network, it became clear that the mediums were not only practitioners of the occult, but also masters of concealment, capable of shaping events while remaining just out of reach of justice. Years passed, and the town that had once been gripped by fear and fascination slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the shadows of the past lingered. Madame Seraphina had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic note claiming she had transcended the material world. Other practitioners of the occult quietly closed their shops, moved away, or faded from public attention. Despite the apparent resolution, the pattern of deaths and mysterious occurrences remained an unresolved question in the minds of residents. No arrests had been made, and the investigations yielded only fragments of evidence, leaving a lingering suspicion that the network of psychics had operated with impunity, their true reach and influence never fully understood. The town's history had been irreversibly altered. Stories of Eleanor Whitman, Peter Lowell, and Margaret Hayes became cautionary tales whispered in libraries, cafes, and social gatherings. People who once sought the guidance of fortune-tellers and mediums now approached the mystical with skepticism, wary that curiosity could come with deadly consequences. Those who had remained in the town recalled shadowy figures and unexplained movements long after the mediums had gone, leading some to speculate that the influence of Mystic Haven extended beyond physical presence, leaving behind an invisible web of control and manipulation. Investigators and historians alike pieced together the evidence that survived. Journals, cryptic symbols, and reports of rare herbs pointed toward a carefully maintained system in which the mediums used psychological influence, fear, and superstition to manipulate clients. Some patterns suggested that certain deaths had been deliberately orchestrated to remove obstacles or consolidate control over wealth and social connections. The realization that these acts were likely deliberate created a chilling perspective on the true power of the psychics. They had not only predicted futures, they had shaped them with calculated precision, leaving only traces for others to discover long after the events occurred. Public fascination persisted. Documentaries, newspaper articles, and online discussions kept the story alive, questioning whether the mediums had truly escaped justice. Residents reported continued sightings of black-robed figures near abandoned homes and whispers of strange rituals in the dead of night. Even without concrete evidence, the legend of Mystic Haven and its practitioners had become a part of the town's identity, a reminder of how belief, fear, and deception could intertwine to create real-world consequences. The town had been taught a hard lesson. Trust in the unseen could be as dangerous as it was alluring, and those claiming mystical power might use it for influence far beyond the spiritual realm. The case files, diaries, and fragmented testimonies left open-ended questions that authorities could not answer. Did the psychics deliberately orchestrate the deaths, or were some events coincidental, amplified by superstition? Had Madame Seraphina and her colleagues truly vanished? Or had they simply learned to operate even more carefully, continuing to manipulate lives from afar? The uncertainty became a permanent part of the town's consciousness, a chilling reminder that the line between the natural and the supernatural, the innocent and the criminal, could be almost impossible to define. In the end, the story of Mystic Haven became a legend of its own, a tale of fortune, influence, and possible murder, where the dead spoke only through the shadows left behind, and the living were forced to navigate a world in which unseen hands might still shape the course of fate.